Welcome everybody to the second in the patron series of interviews. I am so happy to be on this side of the camera again for a change. Completely excited to have my friend Shane Bales here with me. Mostly because I lost him for like a year, but we'll talk about that. We will, because it's part and parcel of the warp and woof and warp and weave and whatever of this entire year. So, and it's really important that we kind of touch on that. And I hope, no, most assuredly, this will not be the only interview I do with Shane. Hi, Shane. So happy you're here.
I have some background noise outside, so I've been trying to keep myself muted a little bit, just to warn you.
Don't worry about it, please. It's okay. It's all good. Okay, so first thing I have to say, two things I have to say to begin with. First of all, this guy's known as Shane the Ruiner, but let me get there in a second. I want you to know he lives in Canada. He's Canadian. Okay. I spent the last 10 years in Maine, so, you know, I have a relationship with Canadians in a Mainer kind of way, which is very unique and specific. Also, he's a musician, and he plays with a band called, I know it. Tell me what the name of it is. Unraveled. It's Unraveled, isn't it?
Another one called The Mindset as well, but they're kind of not doing much these days. So Unraveled.
Well, okay, you will be, I'm sure. That's an off and on artist kind of thing, right? I mean, it's like being any kind of artist, writer, whatever. So I want to make sure that we put those things out there as well. It's an important thing to be a musician. I come from a long line of musicians, and it is a real big part of the background of my life. So I understand all of that, and my children are musicians and all of that. Okay, so first thing I want to say is this is Shane Bales, but he is known as Shane the Ruiner, and I'm going to ask him to really give us a serious sense of who he is and how he came to be where he is. And it's probably the billionth time that you've had to do that, but because, as I was just saying, you came to me in a very specific and unique way, and I don't really know all of your background. I try to piece it together from conversations that you have with Randy or some of this other stuff, and it's hugely interesting to me, but every time I listen to you and these wonderful interviews that you do, I realize that there's stuff I don't know that I really want to know. And Shane has said I can ask him anything tonight, so I'm going to hold him to that. The other thing is, it was about 2 years ago now, I think, maybe not quite that long, but I did an interview. One of the Bases interviews I did was with Miles Johnson. It was Bases 45 Part 3, and I had just come back from the United States, and somebody had put a painting or an artistic rendition of Kali on the side of the Empire State Building. I was completely flipped about that. And because I was talking about that, somebody pointed me to Shane and one of the things that he'd written about that, which was huge. Oh, it's so huge what you said about that. Anyway, and they said I looked at his blog, it said Shane the Ruiner, and I went, I'm a little scared. Shane the Ruiner? You know what I mean? So I had to have Randy vouch for you. So it's really interesting because people rolling this whole Shane the Ruiner around thing in their brains and their mind, they talk about it all the time, don't they? It's so funny. Well, anyway, so if you don't mind, just kind of start where you find zero. Where do you find start? Where do you find start, Shane, in your life?
I don't know where to start. I guess the way that people came to know me was because I'd written the blog. When I originally wrote it for a group of friends who are just personal friends. I called them my intended audience of the blog. A couple dozen people. And then one of the blog topics was avians, which was a hot topic at the time because of some other speakers. And it got found because of that way, and then it kind of got posted on some of the internet forums like Project Avalon, and other people were using it, especially the one I wrote on avians for their own means. They were using it, so people started to kind of come into contact with myself through that. when I chose The Ruiner, because I wasn't writing for, the alternative media or a larger audience at all, it was a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, a little bit of a joke, something that was understood by my intended audience, the people that I meant to read the blog. And a lot of the kind of character persona that I put forth when I'm writing in that way also was that, for that same purpose. It was meant to code certain things for the people that I was writing for, not for any other person who might stumble across it. So I understood right away why the confusion with that, and maybe the unsettling feeling that you may have gotten from
I was like, what?
and the song that I equated to it and everything else. But once people started kind of hearing me speak, I guess they kind of understood that I'm not really this dark, evil man who has curtains or anything like that. So anyways, obviously I come from two different Illuminati bloodline families. Whatever that means doesn't mean much to me, doesn't mean much to them. Seems to mean a lot to a lot of people who research these subjects, but over the course of time, bloodlines and their meaning have lost some potency in terms of how much they matter to what we call the Illuminati.
Right.
And through my upbringing with them, I was involved in what people call projects and programs of various types, and introduced to a lot of the different cults and various organizations underneath their umbrella, and was kind of given an interesting point of view on it all. It's kind of like a jack of many trades, not a specialist of any one, because I was given a bit of an overview on what they are trying to do as a whole, as opposed to focusing on one set of rules or teachings or one program at a time or anything like that. Where a lot of people tend to, they get put into a program and that's the program they run with throughout their career, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or their involvement with it. Mine was different. I got kind of bounced around so that I could experience various things and have kind of an overview of what they're trying to achieve.
That was on purpose then?
It was on purpose, absolutely. Partially because finding one fit for me at the beginning was very tough for them. And someone along the line just kind of decided that, well, why don't we use him in this way? Kind of give him kind of general overview of what we're doing. And it was never for any particular reason. Like, it's definitely not to become any kind of whistleblower or come out and divulge any of that information to you or to anyone else. It was never any part of the plan. It was really just something that they were experimenting with. I think generations beyond me probably had whatever their experiments yielded as being their intention. But with myself, it never quite worked out that way.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I mean, I have a very normal life as well. Like a musician, I have a day job. I have a family. I have these things as well. So a lot of what I did in getting out of all of those programs and whatnot was just to kind of enable myself to have this normal life, because I didn't want to do what they were doing. I don't really feel like I'm definitely not a whistleblower per se, so I don't feel like I'm standing up to combat them in any type of way.
Right.
And I just kind of want to separate myself from them in terms of, like, I definitely won't have any more involvement with them, as in stay in touch with people who do, which I've been open about, but myself would never perform any actions that they asked me to do or otherwise at this point in time in my life. I guess I'm trying to utilize what I learned through all of that in the best possible way, which I don't necessarily feel like I teach anyone anything, but I do hope to inspire people with my words or with my actions or just with my character, I suppose, in such a way that they can empower themselves with the things that they're learning through all of this, leaking of information,
It's really interesting you're saying all this, and at the same time, what's occurring to me is this quality. We've talked about this quality that you have of being someone people like to, you're almost like a confessor, really. You're someone people come to and for solace. That's what it is. Damn, that's what it is. It's solace. They come to you for that. Is this something that you know?
Absolutely. It's something that I was recognized about me when I was very young, that a lot of people just seem to be able to speak around me very freely.
Mm-hmm.
As a communicator, and that's the quality that I have that, you know, got them to use me. It's not my speaking ability or anything like that. It's more just my ability to listen.
Yeah.
I think what it is an energetic thing because of the things that I've seen and been through on my own. I feel that other people kind of feel that when they're in my presence or speaking with me, and that comes forward in such a way that they feel free to speak to me. It's almost like understanding that I'll be able to relate to whatever they're saying to at least some degree, and
Right.
definitely judge them or hold anything against them. I kind of pride myself on being very understanding of everyone, right? Like the darkest being to the lightest being and everything in between. I don't like to separate the two. It's like I don't like the idea of like this person is wholly evil and therefore I should never have any kind of involvement with them, you know, or this
Yeah.
person is mentally ill so I should avoid them. You know, it's the same type of mentality. I don't I don't feel that way. I feel like maybe my influence can bring them back from their illness or bring them back from their darkness. And if that's possible, then it's worth trying. And I feel like cutting them off because of whatever stigma is attached to their title or their position or their history
Right.
isn't fair.
Right. Right. It's really clear about you when you talk to you, when when a person talks to you for any amount of time that in fact is the case. The thing about solace, though, is that implies a balm of some sort. That does imply a balm. It implies solace, some kind of dressing of the wound. You know what I mean? So that's a really interesting thing about you. Anyway, we're just going to keep pointing out interesting things about Shane as we go along. So, okay, so the thing about this, see, this is why we need to, I already know we need to have many, many interviews, many conversations that we can, together that we can put out because there's levels, you know, and levels of your life. That, for example, right now, one of the levels I could go to would be the things that you know that have nothing to do with the Illuminati. It's kind of like I'm bored out of my brain with that stuff too, to be honest. Blah. Yes, already, right? I did a tremendous amount of work on social engineering, and I think that needed to be done, and it's collected up and all of that stuff, you know? And now my work is like reverse engineering the bits of that. So I'm still involved in that kind of thing. But you want to go deeper. You do. Otherwise, you're just putting yourself to sleep with a new song, you know? And you know some deeper stuff. You know some deeper stuff that I don't know at all. Like, for example, you were talking to Randy about the parents. What is that? I mean, can you make a line there for me so I understand what you mean?
Well, it's I'm trying to think of a concept to equate it to, but if you think of it like the history keepers or the people who have been there since the beginning and therefore have all of the historical knowledge of all of the different actions and how it's steered us to this point. And because they have all of that, they're able to make the decisions necessary to jump off from this point. Over the course of hundreds of years, thousands of years, they've been kind of steering us in a certain direction, which is what we're seeing right now. I mean, it's taken time due to building up technology. It's taken time due to the amount of time it takes for social engineering to take hold, right? But we're at that kind of apex of everything that they've had intended through this.
Yeah.
So what the parents are and was the kind of top of the pyramid in terms of making the proper decisions in order to get to the end, because there's so many different factors in place that there's no one clear path. There's a bunch of different roads that kind of lead to this destination, and everything's moving towards that destination. But, different roadblocks come on different parts of the road at different times. And so I guess what their job is to look at everything kind of, in the helicopter, looking down at all those roads and be able to say, okay, that one's clear, use that one to get to the next destination.
Interesting. Very, very interesting, because really interesting because, as you know, my primary drive right now from the other side is the Fae, as you know, which we can talk about later. They don't care about this stuff. Do you know that? The Fae are not, the Fae, we should wait for later. They're so intrinsically married to this planet, to this earth. And their rising back to consciousness has to do, well, anyway, it's really interesting because ordinarily I would say, how can these two things exist at the same time? I would, but they do. They do exist at the same time. They don't cancel each other out because they have completely different goals and completely different presentations in this reality and all kinds of things. So it's really interesting that didn't sort of come into conflict, because I thought that the kinds of things that might conflict with the things that that are coming to me, and they just don't. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the more mundane things too. I have to do it, and the reason is here. Here's why. First of all, I went back. Okay, I want to say right now, I went back and watched that Bases episode that I hadn't watched in a bajillion years because Miles yanked it. I couldn't find it, blah, 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 And I realized, Shane, how much this last year has, and my being under the thumb of where I was working had shut me up. I had no idea, man. I looked back and I went, wow, you used to just go for it. And I realized I haven't been doing that in like the last year and a half. So it was really great for me to get a look at that and realize that, it has to do with the anarchist and liberty and all that again. But anyway, it wasn't too long after that we came up on the Max stuff. Because I want to talk about Max just for a sec, because this is a situation that affected all of us, whether we knew him or not, deeply. And I know you are you're not sort of, you're totally immersed in that world. Yes. And you can talk about whatever you want to talk about when it comes to that stuff. When I met you, it was because of this piece of information you gave me about CERN, which I really do want to revisit later on in the interview as well, because I don't think anybody's really talked about that, really. Not really. I mean, I started to talk about it, and then Max died, and I don't know. Anyway, and I know that you're going to have some insights. So the thing about, all right, let me make sure I cover this the way I wanted to cover it. The way that was handled, the way that came about, in my view, was turned loose on us almost like an infection. And that's not a judgment about Max at all. He had nothing to do with how this was turned loose on us, However, it really did do that to a lot of us. And you'll say how that affected you, but it actually even affected my life pretty deeply. First of all, you went away before I could even get a handle on knowing you very deeply, which I was actually kind of sad about. But there you go. You did your thing. You did what you had to do, right? Now, right before Max died, there was a conference I was supposed to speak at. It was Miles Johnston's annual summer blah, blah. And we were having words at that time because he had invited Channel 4 to film the damn thing. It was my first rollout of the Fae, as if I was going to do that in front of Channel 4. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, so I backed out of the conference, and he was pretty angry with me. And then he was really angry with me. He pulled all my interviews, which is what he tends to do and all that stuff. So then Max passed away, and it was about 5 minutes later when Miles and someone else were doing a show about Max's death. I was immediate, absolutely immediate. And he tried to pull me into it. He tried to pull me into it by saying that that I had been angry with Max because I thought Max was stealing my material. Well, it was true that Max did show up, rolling out some of the stuff that I had been talking about, but that's not why I didn't go to the conference. I didn't go to the conference because I didn't want Channel 4 filming me. Regardless, all he had to do was bring my name into it. You know what I mean? That's all you got to do. I was on my way to Australia. At the time, it had taken me about 6 years to get there. I had a very clear sense that the next place I needed to take my stuff was, strangely enough, Australia, Japan, and India. 3 countries that are absolutely difficult, very, very difficult to be heard in. Anyway, but him bringing me into this whole Max thing, it literally allowed one of the primary trolls and gatekeepers in Australia to just completely dismember me before I even got there. And I've still not recovered from that. So nothing to do with Max, but Max's death was used in that way, The other thing, so there's that. Okay, there's that. The other thing I want to say to you, and I want your instant reaction to this, okay? If you don't mind. Max and Sarah were at the conference, I think, at that conference. And so was Harold Kaltzfella. He got called in because I wasn't going to come. And I know for a fact from Harold himself and from several other people that when Max and Harold were put in close proximity, that Max literally started to like collapse, cry, shake, hyperventilate. There was a massive effect. Do you have any idea, right off the top of your head, what was that encounter about, man?
Not really sure. I know what it sounds like. I would imagine that it sounds like Max having a very adverse reaction to something artificial. I don't know the situation well enough to really give a proper opinion or make any kind of statement about it, but my first thought anyways was it reminds me of that type of reaction when someone's maybe kind of being driven by a more natural source, and they come in contact with someone who's coming in with a more artificial signature.
Yeah.
But I don't know for sure. Obviously.
Right. I just thought, it occurred to me that you might have heard that story before in some other scenario with other like people. So I thought you might have, but yes, I think that that's probably a safe assumption what you're making there. So what happened then, though, was that we all kind of went to ground, didn't we, in a way, to try to figure out why we were doing what we were doing, how we were bringing our messages, what's responsible, what's irresponsible, all of those sorts of existential questions. And most of us really pared down the people that we would hang with, the people that we trusted, the people that we were back to back with. So anyway, so do you have anything at all? I mean, I realize we have talked this to death. I do. We have talked this to death, but I wanted to bring it up because it's related to our relationship. I mean, it was kind of like at that moment when things started to, I don't know. Anything you want to say about that right now?
I don't really know what to say about it anymore. It was why I kind of walked away for a little while. I was pretty upset. I had just kind of come to know Max, so there was the personal side of that. There was the other side of it of just kind of being in a similar spot to him and realizing what the community was doing in response to what went on
Right.
with him. And I wasn't happy with a lot of the things people were saying. I understand, people want to answer questions. They've got questions in a situation like that. They're reaching, but I guess I personalized it and thought about what if that were me. I've said it in another place as well, where I do a lot of stupid things. Like I go walking in the woods. I like to climb cliffs. I like to swim in places where you probably shouldn't. All these type of things. And one day I could die doing something like that, right? And no one's really gonna have an explanation as to what killed me. I'm just gonna turn up dead 3 or 4 days later, and I don't want the internet speculation of, maybe he was used in a ritual and he's not actually dead and he's just been buried for the next 40 days. I don't ever want that to be me, and I know Max wouldn't have either. And I had a great deal of empathy for his family,
Yeah.
his child,
Yeah.
Sarah, people who knew him close,
Right.
even Miles to an extent, because I mean, it was close to him, right? And my initial feeling was, feeling bad for everyone who knew him, and not to mention the community as a whole. But then when I saw how it was handled, that feeling bad for people kind of turned into being mad at people. And so I realized that my anger was a sign that I needed to step away for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I did, and I'm less angry about it now. Now it's just sad to me. I don't want to see anyone else fall the same way that Max fell, right?
Right. Okay.
I
I
guess if I
promise.
focus on anything that I'm doing, it is kind of to give people tools so that doesn't have to happen again, and to kind of help us as a community grow to a point where we don't allow anything like that to happen again.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And that we have to talk about. We have to talk about a lot. How is it that we make sure I mean, these are the pieces of what we're doing, the structure, the construction of how we're doing what we're doing. And that, I think we're doing a pretty good job in most circles talking about that. You know what? I really do. I think we knew what had to be done and we stepped up. So, yeah, going back though to that, let's talk about that thing that no one really hashed out, because you're gonna have stuff about it. It was August 13th, and I think it was 2 years ago now. Kali showed up on the side of the Empire State Building, man. Now, as an American, that just blew me away. I was like, what? What is happening here? But you know what? You've got her three eyes, past, present, and future, and you've got her tongue coming out of her mouth. We also just talked about a similar scenario with the three Norns in Norse myths, and how the cauldron is the larynx, right? And that this image is a particularly human, I hate that word human, I've got to find a different, our being image in this creation, okay, in creating what's around us. So I think the way that I broke it down, and I was really just doing a sort of train of thought thing, was this guy that put it up there was Cy Hoyos, and it was PSI, which is another word for particle physics. Hoy, which I finally figured out was a boat that transports goods up and down a river. And then OS, people were saying Osiris, and I was saying nope, operating system. So that goes straight to CERN, which is why your brilliant knowledge that the operating infrastructure, yes, is called Kali. And of course, everybody knows that there's Shiva's, statue right outside the door. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because not too long after that, they blew a hole in a mountain in Switzerland, right? And made this tunnel and had this huge sort of ceremonial magic event. What do you think? Can you say some stuff about that, Shane?
Well, I guess it's such a big topic, I don't know where to start, but CERN basically would be the operating system for what we call that Saturn moon matrix, right? Like the digital overlay that is produced by this energetic exchange that we have going on between Saturn, the moon, and ourselves. That is all performed by an artificial intelligent computer system that we know as CERN. Obviously, it's there's the public, persona of what CERN is, and then there's kind of what we're identifying it as being other layered. It's a broadcast system, essentially. It's like taking a signal and making it broadband across the entire world. We now have this 5K technology, which is going to tap into that. It's going to make it a lot easier to broadcast what they broadcast. And it's got multiple uses. First of all, it can affect things on the ground, like right here on the planet. It's got a constant dialogue with the moon, it's got a constant dialogue with Saturn, and the various control structures that are in place for that. Brings us into another topic, which is the transfer from magic to technology. And this is essentially that is the technological version of what people call a Stargate, or what people would call prison walls, the Matrix, various things like that, to different terms to say the same thing, which is kind of a distortion between what is reality and what we're perceiving as reality.
Right.
Changes what we see, hear, taste, smell. All of these different senses are affected by it. And then other uses can be broadcasting, let's say, a general idea or an event into the minds of people.
Inception,
what people call the Mandela effect. These different glitches that can be produced by that particular technology there's several of them, so it's hard for people to identify any one function of CERN because of the fact that it has several. And people will say a lot of different things, and a lot of them are correct. It's the only incorrect thought behind it would be that it's just that. It can also do this, it can also do that. And it's very clever because when you look at it just from the mainstream perspective, it's perfectly concealed, right? Like in what it is at the mainstream, what we can all accept level, it's a technology that is so beyond our scope in everyday life that we don't really even know how to ask questions about exactly what they're doing. Certain people I've heard in the mainstream will say certain things like, that they believe it can open a black hole, and they're using it anyways, but that's about as far as the questioning of it ever goes.
right.
And even if you only look at what they've told us about it, there's a lot of unanswered questions there, and there's a lot of potential for what it could do and could be used for. So for me or yourself or someone else to come along and say, actually, there's more to that, is not even discredited by what they've put into the mainstream. It's actually kind of given the open door for, there is that possibility, because it is capable of much more than what they're telling us, and by their own admission.
Mm-hmm.
So
why do you think there was a call put out for artists? Did you see that?
I did.
See, this is where this is where the thread, gets really sexy for me, because they put a call out for artists, then they're going for our imagination, in my view. But what do you think?
Well, that's exactly it. Is they need artists to, they're not the most creative bunch in the terms of like just coming up with images, coming up with, what a landscape might look like, what certain characters might look like, certain ET races might look like. So they call in artists to come in and give them a bunch of concept drawings, and then they use those and they put them into their computer systems, and that becomes part of different types of broadcast signals or illusions that they create along the way. It's tied in with all of the other technologies we talk about too, like Blue Beam and HARP and all of these things too. It has a kind of symbiotic effect with all of those different things, because it is like the operating system for all of the different technologies to come together. It creates a field essentially for it to all operate within, and because of that, it is tied into all of those other systems.
You know what
artists, yes, that's just it. Is like the
absolutely. It's all about our imagination, our imagination, your imagination.
Exactly. It's one of their biggest goals to do that. And the best way to do that, I always say, they can either give you a book and a description of Gandalf, as in Lord of the Rings, or give you a movie and Gandalf is Sir Ian McKellen. He looks exactly like this.
Right.
The book makes you have to conjure Gandalf in your own imagination. You have to create him for yourself based on some general descriptions.
Right.
And with the movie, this is what he looks like. And that is an excellent example of how they've destroyed our imagination, or they're attempting to, and have been quite successful with the majority of us in destroying our imagination.
Unfortunately, yeah, or at least making it so latent that we have no connection to it, or it's dire. So we say it's dire. It reminds me in 2008, 2009, one of my kids was at Carnegie Mellon for the summer. And during that summer, I became aware that Bill Gates was trying to join the computer department with the arts department. And I thought, Jesus, what a travesty! What the hell is that about? You know what I mean? But those sorts of things, these are the things that are happening. And it also reminds me of, because you and I are going to be doing some lecturing together. I'm so excited. Anyway, one of the first things I always say at the beginning of my lecture, since my whole thing is about the imagination, is I finally did put together a PowerPoint behind myself to help people go through. But for the longest time, I had nothing going behind myself because I thought it's a bit rich, isn't it, for me to come up here and start talking about the imagination and not insist that you use your imagination. But then I went to a conference in Vienna, and one of the fellows I was speaking with said, "No, people really want that back there. They want it behind you. It helps them keep track of what you're doing, and it engages their subconscious." So I actually tell people that at the beginning of every one of my lectures. I say, listen, this is behind me because it engages your subconscious. You need to understand that's what's happening right now. And then I go ahead and go for it. But yeah, so the CERN thing and engaging the artists, there's still something about it. I know that you are absolutely correct about your delivery of the information and the sort of scope of what they can do and all of that. But I will forever maintain that we're better than that. We are beings who are more powerful than that, who are elusive, who are still elusive. And
that's why I don't like going into a lot of the Illuminati stuff, is because it makes it sound dire and almost like they're more powerful than you, and I don't believe that. That's why I avoid it. I would rather tell you things that make you realize that the only gap between you and them is that they've made you not believe in all of the things that they believe,
right,
and against you. And as soon as you remember that it's in there, it's in your genetic memory, it's in every source of memory that you have, that these things are real and you're capable of them.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
It's all you need to know. It is. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to say that to everybody, like Johnny Apple imagination or something. Anyway, it's a worthwhile thing to do, I think, because anything less than that is just a living death in my view. So listen, the one thing I do want to ask you about, because it creeped me out to such an extent, when they did this ceremonial magic exhibition, when they opened that tunnel in Switzerland, what they always do this creepy walk. Do you know which one I mean? Where they go, what is that about, Shane? It's so creepy.
Pink Floyd, The Wall, even the animation, if you remember, Summer's walking. It's a military gate walk as well, right?
Yeah.
It really is just kind of showing the ants go marching 2 by 2 song in real time. Magic obviously works by giving you something to represent for your mind to grab a hold of and conjure a thought, a feeling, an energy from.
Yeah.
And so that is their way of kind of putting into our subconscious or even our conscious mind through magical symbolic means that conformity is good, compliance is good,
Right.
Slavery is okay.
Right.
Hive mind type mentality and groupthink type mentality, all of those things are kind of reinforced by that particular action, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, I don't know why that particular thing just makes my skin crawl every time I see it. And you do see it, and anyway, it's got to be, you're right, it's got to be part of the magic. So listen, I want to talk about our lectures and our focus for a while, Shane and I, is going to be magic, because we're both tremendously interested in it. He has his level of expertise in his arena, and I have mine, and I think that they will make a great combo, but they're different enough that they have an integrity of their own. And so I'm always going to bring up, this is a subject I'm always going to bring up with Shane, always, always, always. For one thing, okay, there's lots of things. First of all, you're surrounded by magic all the time. It's everywhere. It's everything, gang. It's everything, okay? And I will just stick in right now that what I keep saying over and over and over again, the human imagination is the translator between the morphogenic field, which is pure potential, and this particular plane. End of story. That's how special you are. You are that. You are rare in the universe. I hate to use the word singular because that goes back to people I don't like, singularity and all that. But you are singular in the universe. We're the only ones who can do it, which is why they're constantly after us. I do a lot of business on Facebook. And people have lots and lots of opinions about Facebook. All of them right. Every one of them are correct. Okay. It is everything that you say it is, and less and more. It is also, Facebook is a giant arena for sorcery. Okay. It is. I see it all the time. And the only way that I can speak about it is when I speak about my own experiences. But I want to say this because I'm sure that Shane's noticed this as well. I started to learn some things about this when I did start to try to do some business on Facebook, because this is where everybody is right now. And so that's fine. That's where we go. But the kinds of things that happen to me, Shane will have his own experiences, but the kind of things that happen to me are like, I will get really excited about a piece of knowing, and I will want to get everybody who follows me excited about it. So I'll say something like, this is what I'm working on, stay tuned, this is great, blah, blah, blah. And instantly I'll have maybe 10 people jam my comment section with work from other people. Do you know what I mean? So that the last thing anybody's thinking about is what I just said, right? That happens to me all the time. I've just learned to start blocking people. Remove. The other thing, though, that's really interesting, because we can go into the Corey good, not too deeply, because I know you've been talking about that too, forever and ever. But interestingly, I've had Dangerous Imagination that I did with Harold out for a couple of years. Well, 3 years now. The first edition's been out for like 3 years. And we both were lecturing on it. So it was not a secret. It did pretty well. And I think it made, sort of arrived where it needed to arrive. I just recently did a new edition. It's like 600 pages. I've got a new section on the psychiatric industry, which probably got me into a lot of trouble. Psychiatric industry, the Vatican, expanded version of chemtrails, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I launch it. I start talking about it. I start doing interviews about it. And then I'm made aware for the very first time, there's this site on Facebook, this group. It's got like 22,000 followers, Shane. Okay, huge group, right? And I'm all of a sudden looking at this message that's sent out by the guy who administrates this group, no one has ever really written anything about social engineering. We need to really start writing. If you have any ideas about the various facets of social engineering, well, you just bring them to me and we'll get something together, because no one, over and over, because no one, the list practically looked like my table of contents. And I went, what? I thought, this is like a giant eraser, man. Trying to erase what I had just done. Dude. So I even actually sent him a message. I said, actually, there's a pretty big body of work on this, and I just brought out a new expanded version. And he was like, oh yeah, I'll get that, and I'll read it, and I'll do a review on it. I was like, oh my God. Anyway, so I realized at that moment that there's spell and counterspell going on there all the time on Facebook. It's really literally magic. It's literally me putting my stuff out and then somebody getting their wand, I'm doing it. You know what I mean? And this guy is a huge supporter of Corey Good and his stuff too. FYI, just saying. So I'm learning some stuff about the magic, the sorcery and the magic that goes on in Facebook. It's not just all the other stuff that it is. Yeah, they're following us. Listen, if you're still somebody who's filling out all those questionnaires and trying to figure out what wizard you are and what colors you like and all that stuff, I don't think there's any help for you, because you're just really doing the social engineering for them. I can say it once again, stop, don't do that. But, anyway, so what do you think about Facebook, Shane? What's your opinion?
Tough, but a big question.
Have you had experiences like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm more because I stopped using Facebook to kind of for this purpose. I mean, I still get tagged. I still I comment on stuff, but I got rid of the accounts that I was posting a lot of my own stuff on last year. And I mean, you would see it. You would see a combination of things. You would see, first of all, you put something up and immediately something else would come along that was, like you said, the counterspell to it. Or you would see other people kind of copy and paste it and put it up and kind of forget to leave the who wrote it at the bottom.
Right.
I still see a lot of that with my friends, yourself included, where I've seen other people who've copy and pasted things that you've written into stuff and never mentioned your name. I guess it's a kind of common problem with the internet these days, though, right? It's not just us. It's a common problem with the internet. Nobody really knows how to approach copyright in terms of internet sharing. So I don't think a lot of it is deliberate, but it happens.
It does happen. I catch myself every once in a while doing it, just forgetting or whatever.
Likewise. I mean,
it's not okay, but it's not okay. That's for sure. It's not okay.
And then just because of the free access to it, I mean, you'll see other things too, like there's a different type of magic and maybe a little bit more malicious type, but even what happened with our friend Randy when he made his post about Corey and whatnot, and then the next thing you know, other people were doing interviews about his post, right? So that's another form of the magical involvement, if you want to call it that we can have with social media in general. Because I mean, we're more familiar with Facebook. Twitter is bigger for some people too, right? And you see the same thing. And
you do. I don't get
the same type of trolling in comment sections and everything like that. It's a new dynamic that we as a society are learning to deal with, but it does give a big platform for people to in various ways energetically manipulate each other, and which is magic. A lot of when you talk about magic, I mean it's pretty much everything we do, right? Because of the very nature of how we're interacting with this holographic reality is magic in a sense. Everything that's created and we create is a form of magic, and that's why everything kind of can fall underneath that. And understanding magic is important, because it is how we interact with our world. It's not as solid as we think it is. So.
No.
And so like Facebook has that element, just because I mean there's spellcraft involved. There's emotional, psychic manipulation, every type of energetic manipulation you could think of, and manipulation having a negative connotation, but it's a word, it has a definition.
Right.
It's all involved there, and gang stalking can happen, bullying can happen.
Oh yeah. Oh God.
All of those different things. Facebook has its own algorithms that are at play there, and its own AI systems that are in play there in terms of advertising and just who sees what, and all those privacy settings that we never really ever look at, that are in ways that we don't even understand, limiting who sees what we're posting, or opening up what we're posting to people we may not even want to have see what we're posting. So it is quite the battlefield, so to speak, of
it is, and
but
we can look at it as learning too. I mean,
Absolutely.
we're in this now. Yeah. We're in it, so we have to learn to use our wands. If I'm going to use analogies like that in this arena. We just have to. Like, okay, and yeah, you know what? I remember I thought Randy was the first one who brought up Corey Good, but he's saying he's not. He told me I was mistaken. It's just that I saw Randy's bit first. And the shitstorm that descended on Randy because of it. And I have to say, I had no idea who Corey Good was at all, or the Blue Avians, or any of that jazz, because my research is always in a different direction. And, but instantly, I will always defend Randy. I can't imagine not. And so my instantly becoming involved in that, I was instantly getting private messages from people who had been supporting me and were supporting sort of some of the events that I was trying to put together, and telling me that was a big mistake. It was a big mistake to come out against Corey Good and all that jazz and the Joshua Tree, because I was alienating this new audience I was trying to cultivate. And I mean, it was instant, man. And I thought, okay, bye. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. I don't care about that stuff. I don't care about that stuff at all. The one thing I will say, though, is, and it's been very interesting to see you and Randy and everybody take this on, especially since you have some inside information on what it's like to be one of those guys who gets stuck at the front of, a missile, a rocket like that, a money-making rocket, basically. But for me, I became interested when it became something that I was interested in when I saw this thing about Corey's kids. So now you got my attention. We can't have that. That's where I'm going to step in and say, no, not so much. No backpacks filled with disclosure bullshit or whatever the hell is in those backpacks. Corey's kids? What? Anyway, so do you want to say anything about, because I've also been watching all this stuff going on with people I don't really know, but I know who they are. There's Carrie Cassidy has jumped in. Bill Ryan has jumped in. I can't even think. Who else has jumped in? Is that it? And Randy and Justin Deschamps, or whatever his name is, in his group. Who else is on this bandwagon? Oh, hey, actually, before you answer that question, I have to tell you that I did. I used to work for Ike. I worked for Ike for a little while. I have to say I like David Icke, but it's not really probably David Icke. I have to tell you this story. You ready? We were down to like a skeleton crew because it was just at the very end, like 6-8 people in the office all the time. And there was this clairvoyant who lived on the streets, right? And she used to sneak up the back stairs because she couldn't really get past security. So she'd sneak up the back stairs and she'd hang out with us all day telling us stuff, right? And one day she looked at us and she goes, you realize that's not David Icke? We went, really? Who is it? But I kind of think she's probably right. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, I'm bringing up Ike because there was a point in time where both Wilcock and who's the guy in Japan?
Ben Fulford.
Fulford. where their names were floated to, because we were sort of attaching ourselves to various activists around the world. We sort of had shows and had media and things like that. And Ike flipped his lid over those two. He's like, it's not my decision, but whoa, he just wasn't having any of that, man. He just wasn't having any of that. So but I mean, that's kind of like it's like this wolf doesn't like this wolf doesn't like this wolf. I mean, what do you say to stuff like that? Anyway, I forget what I was asking you. What was I asking you, my friend?
I don't know, because now I have a comment in mind on that.
Corey, did you want to comment on that? You can. You could say anything you
that's
want.
the problem with the community, is exactly that type of attitude. I mean, I've just talked about talking to David Wilcock, the other side of that, and the same type of thought or the same type of attitude towards it, where it's almost like a competition.
It is too.
What competition, right?
It is. It is. It is a competition. People have their sections. No, people have their sections of the market. They have their sections of this, whatever the hell it is. I can tell you that for sure, because I'll tell you what. I'm not even sure you know my whole story, but this started for me when my mom was killed, like 7 years ago, and that event caused me to fucking look up at the sky, and then the next thing from her was like, okay, do something about it. Okay, that was that. So when I got into that, which is as a lot of people's entry level is chemtrails, which is great. It's a lot of people's entry level, but it took me about 5.5 seconds to realize that there was a good old boys club with about 6 people in it, and you weren't getting your voice heard in the United States. You just weren't getting your voice heard in the United States. They had the market cornered. They were doing what they were doing with it, and that was it. So I ended up in Europe. And as a friend of mine recently pointed out to me, I've spent the last several years kicking the door down trying to get my voice heard. And, and so now I'm kind of on a different course, but a better course. Anyway, so yeah, that's what that's about. They have the market cornered, which is a problem. You should be suspicious of that, in my view.
Absolutely, and that goes to tie it back into your question about Corey Good. That's what's going on with Gaia TV right now, is they're purchasing up all of these little, everybody who speaks in this media as much as they can, and they're bringing them all under one umbrella. And I mean, let me tell you that an umbrella organization is not a good thing, and we need to really look at what's going on there. That's kind of what's being pointed out now. It's not, it's not about Corey. It's not about David. It's not about any one person. It's about that particular grouping and what they're doing. I also disagree with, the idea of marketing things to children. That's a little ridiculous in my mind.
Right.
What's going on with what they're calling millennials, which are just, the 20-somethings that are in our movement. They're not kids, but anyways, all of that is not, it's not right. There's enough room here for all of us to breathe. There's enough room for all of us to speak, and there's no reason for any one of us to say, this person doesn't have the right to speak, this person does have the right to speak, and all these little cliques that have been formed in the alternative media and everything else that I've witnessed since I've become involved with it are just disgusting to me. And I understand with grouping with friends or getting along better with certain people than you do with other people. I understand that, but the clique high school nature of it all is the old boys club type nature of it all. Those are all mentalities and modalities that we're trying to combat, and perpetuating them within our own community just does not benefit any of us.
Right.
The idea that, Richard Dolan's research is valid and Corey's is not, just to use him as the example, is also ridiculous to me. One's testimony, there's nothing to back it up. I understand that, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't be allowed to speak about it, right?
Right.
I think the problem comes in making a business out of it and marketing it to people starts to become a problem. Not to say that anyone shouldn't make some money to live or anything like that. There's a difference between, accepting a donation and changing your presentation in order to get said donation, right?
There you go. Right.
That's the difference between being honest with what you're doing and not so much.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to constantly come up with new material that you're going to have to steal from your friends in order to make, the gatekeeper of whatever channel it is you speak through most often happy, then there's going to be a problem, right? And that problem not only infects the community, it infects the individual, and that brings us a little bit back into what was going on, I believe, with Max. It's reminds me a little bit of a different type of way to, what the general story of Kurt Cobain being that he, couldn't write new music and couldn't come up with songs that were better than his original, and it's better to burn out than fade away, right? Like if you take that type of story, it's not unlike what can happen to, the people who speak in this community if they're constantly pressured to come up with new material to fit in with the entertainment side of this in order to keep the marketing going, and that's why it's a problem.
That is part of what happened to Max. I know he was being pressured to come up with new material, but what he was talking about was were the things that had happened to him. Yeah. So how can you come up with new, you know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
It's
if these things are experience-based, and I understand recovering memory, Randy and I have talked about this as well in his interview, but I understand recovering memory, but coming up with a completely new story all of a sudden, that's where things are getting sketchy, and you're clearly marketing to an audience. You're no longer just sharing a story with someone.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you how I get around this, because I've had to figure this out in the last year or so, because it's always really good to team up with people when you do, maybe 2 or 3 of you get together and you do a conference or you do a lecture, whatever. It's a good thing. It's a fertile thing when you do that. And I'm getting ready to do something with Mark Devlin and Tony Sayers here. Tony Sayers does have something. We're not completely alike. Okay, we have some pretty serious differences, and so do Mark and I. But Mark does the music aspects of social engineering, which are interesting, but it's such a huge thing. It's such a huge thing that I knew there were other people working on that, so I just left it. It's like, you do that, because that's like 10 books all on its own. Anyway, so that's Mark Devlin's specialty, and then Sayers is doing his own thing with some social engineering, and he has a really huge following and is a super nice guy. So when we decided to do this thing together in London, I said, you know what? I'm just going to do my Fey lecture, because there's no point in trying to look at what we're each bringing. And, and that's the stuff that you're talking about. You can have that space. You can have that space this time. That's cool. I'll have that space another time. It'll be fine. That's what you do. And so I'm going to bring my Fey lecture instead. This is the only authentic, genuine, clean way to go about it. You can't compare notes. You can't say, well, oh my God, I was at a lecture at a venue, which I absolutely love, and I will go back there next summer. And I think that's one of the ones I was talking to you about, where right before my lecture, the guy who put it on said, don't use the word global. I was like, why? He said, because the cameraman's a flat earther. And I said, okay, thanks for the heads up, man. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, this is
yeah.
This is constant stuff all the time. So I didn't, although I will have to say, the guy was like, are you a flat earther? I said, you know what? I just don't talk about that. I don't talk about that, because all that is divisive, and I don't have to talk about that. He said, well, I don't know. I said, you see, this is what I'm talking about. You think I have to talk about that. You think I have to tell you one way or the other, and I actually don't. I actually don't have to say that. So anyway, it's funny that we're bringing this stuff up, because the only way, if you're comparing notes and you're like, oh, I won't say that because that contradicts something that you're saying, you know what I mean? The other thing I want to talk to you about, because we're probably getting up there. I don't even know how long we've been talking, but one of the interviews you did with Randy, and it might have been an older interview now, but no, it couldn't have been. You were talking about the various forms of aliens and how it had morphed into this narrative where they needed us to evolve, they needed us so that they could evolve or ascend or something. Yeah? Do you remember saying this?
It's a common kind of theme that certain people bring forward with their narrative, that they need us to evolve so that they can evolve. I don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense to me. And, you know, I could look at that from any point of view. Even if I didn't have any type of knowledge of ETs in general, I would probably say that that still doesn't make much sense.
No.
It's like saying we need raccoons to evolve so that the human race can evolve. That doesn't, does that make sense to you? No, it really doesn't. What are you going to learn from the raccoons evolving that is going to cause an evolution? The very spark in your makes no sense. But I think that's a common. A good friend of mine, Bradley Loves, would call that like a stand down program, or like you know, I always say hurry up and wait, where it's basically what they're saying is that, like, you know, nothing's going to happen until something else happens. It's the same type of modality where you just get people waiting for something, right? Or whether it's, you know, and people kind of want that too, because I know from my own speaking, like, people will get really fixated on a specific thing, and that's the only thing that they really care about. Like, I'll use the example of the wave. The wave's coming along to fix everything. Everything's going to be fine after the wave, and that's not what I'm saying. And that's don't sit around waiting for that, because that's not the way it works. The same type of idea.
Well, it went to something else for me though, because I did some work probably 10 years ago now on this idea. Well, I think most of us consider this idea of the other. We have this other, our shadow side, that one, right? And the reason I did some work on that is because I was interested in this idea of the egregore, which you may have heard that word before, and the fact that organizations create their own egregore, group egregore, and this is the shadow that tends to end up driving an organization or a group of people that are trying to. Anyway, this idea to me was extremely interesting about 10 years ago, and I wrote a book about it called Constellatus Companion. When you said this to me, because the guy that I did a lot of research with, his name is Joel Wendt, W-E-N-D-T, and his research led him to postulate that, and this is, a lot of people have said this, that at the moment that we're born, there is a shadow, there is an entity, there's an other that attaches itself to us. It is necessary for us on this planet, kind of like the thorn in our side kind of thing. But they cannot go where we go when we leave this plane. They cannot. They're earthbound, absolutely earthbound. So when you started to say when you said that sometimes, or maybe even inevitably, the narrative leads to them not being able to ascend without us, I started to wonder who the hell we're actually talking to there. Are we talking to aliens, or are we talking to the other? Are we talking to egregores? What's going on? You know what I mean? This is something that I think about a lot because of my work with the Fae, because so many people will say that all negative energies, whether they're jinn or demons or, you know, archons, all or Fae, are just different names for the same negative energy, and they're not. They're not. Okay? Absolutely, they're not. So but these entities will, you know, our thoughts are not our own. That's another one of the things I talk about all the time. Our thoughts are not our own. And so I wonder, Shane, are people saying that because communication of some sort is being misapplied. You're misapplying that. It's not an alien. It's this nonsense that's constantly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's where it all comes from. Is that it's that shadow, whatever form of shadow you want to point at, always kind of. And it's disempowering, right? Like that's the crux of it all. That's the purpose of all of it, is to take your focus away from your own power and giving it to someone else. In that sense, that is where that entire idea, whatever way it gets written into whatever narrative, comes from. This whether it's any one of those different entities you mentioned or whatever, they'll all tell you the same thing, that, you know, they need you for this, or you need them for this idea of codependence is disempowering. And it's the same type of, that's where that all comes from. To answer the question, just generally, that's why people write that into their narratives. It's why it's in some of our myths. It's that whole idea that the shadow is stuck here. The shadow is really just a function of being here, and therefore it's always going to give you the impression that your mortality is all that matters, right? Or your genetics are all that matter. It's, all of those different narratives all point to the same thing, which is that something that ties you here is what's so important. And the part of you that leaves here when this illusion is over for you is not important.
Right.
The opposite is probably more of the truth, but
yeah.
It's like playing a video game. You're going to do everything you can to keep your character alive while you're playing the game. But, once that character dies, then you're not losing sleep over it. It's just
You're so funny. You do know you're talking to a Waldorf teacher here, right? It's like when you're playing a video game. What?
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, there's a couple things before we wrap it up for today that I want to. Did I ask you to sleep on some stuff, and I can't remember what I asked you to sleep on, so we could talk about it. Do you remember? I said, Shane, I said, Shane, sleep on that. We'll talk about it. Well, somebody's going to have to be our brain for us the next time I do that. I better write that down, right? First of all, okay, couple things really. I wanted to talk about programmable matter, but maybe we should talk about that next time because it's kind of beyond, we're kind of at a point now where there's a couple things I want to tell you, because you know that I thoroughly am thoroughly invested in I'm thoroughly invested in this idea that of spelling and words and language and how we actually create things on this planet. Goes all the way back to my work, my research. My work. It makes me sound like I invented them. My research on the Fae, right? My work, because I'm so special. But you know what I realized today? This is so cool. I like to write F-A-E to say Fae. And every time I look at that A and E, I'm reminded of a time when the A and the E were together as one vowel. Do you know how you're writing? It's called the ash. That A and E together is called an ash. An ash is, Yggdrasil was an ash, Shane. The world tree was an ash. I mean, that just made me so happy today. When I saw that, and I went, look at that, that is the best thing ever. One of the things I'm doing, and you may or may not know this because I do talk about it all the time, is I'm doing these workshops now because I'm bound and determined that I'm not going to walk around being, a hand wringer and saying, okay, this is the bad news, and oh my God, what are we going to do about it? Because I really don't like that. I really don't like that at all. Because there's tons of stuff we can do about it. One of the things in particular we can do is a material meditation. It's it's a practical material meditation that was given to us over 100 years ago, and I've done a lot of work on it, and I'm bringing it as a workshop. I call it the Sovereign Imagination Studio Workshop because I don't like the word workshop. I think that words lose all their meaning after a while, and that just doesn't mean anything to anybody anymore. Anyway, so I'm doing it in person and I'm doing it online. And I will just say, because I'm going to ask you, at some point, I'm going to ask you to have, when you have a free hour, I'm going to run you through the workshop online. So I want you to see what it is, okay? Yeah. And in essence, what it teaches you to do is create a thought wave, a waveform out of thought, your own authentic thought. You can create a waveform. And once you've created a waveform, then you are at the archetype of the thing that you're meditating on. And an archetype which I love that word, but you can't really translate it, of something, an object, comes from, I always say this to people at the end of it, comes from where? It comes from the field, man. It comes from the field. So this is a way of teaching yourself to consciously touch the field again. And for me, this is huge. For me, I want everybody to have this exposure to this meditation. And then, it's an act of will. It's an act of will to even get there, right? Like Mount Everest. And then it's another act of will to actually do it. And I just had this thing today. I just had this this intuition today that I'm gonna make Shane do it. Make Shane do it. It takes like an hour with just him and me online. And I don't even know why I'm saying that to everybody, but there's something about that that's important. And I think it has to do with one of the things. God, you guys are gonna just think, no, you know what? It's okay. See, this is what I stopped doing this year, is this free association, which I'm known for and I love, and I think we should all be doing it, Shane, all the time. Just free associate, because that's where it all comes from. That's the meat and the potatoes. That's the yeast, yeah? Anyway, for some reason, it's important that Shane does this. And maybe it's for a comment. Maybe it's, I don't know. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's for a communion. I don't know. There's only one way to find out, right, dude? It's for some reason. It's for some reason. Anyway, so I don't know. Right now, I'll probably just ask you two things. First of all, is there anything you want to say to everybody right now? I know people have been interviewing you up one side and down the other because you're finally back, which is cool. So you may be tired of talking. I don't know. Is there anything you want to talk about?
This is actually, other than, I guess, topic based on Corey, which I had this as the first actual talk I've done since coming back that hasn't been about Corey.
Cool.
But I don't know, maybe we've kind of touched on it here. We talked about imagination, and then you just brought up will, which I always say those are the 2 points of magic. Those are the 2 things that you use, imagination and will. So I think that's been said. I'm glad that we got to touch on a little bit of both of those.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't know. I'm typically better at being asked questions. There's so many different ways I could approach any different subject, so I never know what to talk about.
That's okay, because it certainly isn't going to be the last interview that we do, the last conversation that we have, by any stretch of the imagination. There it is again. I will say 2 things. First of all, Shane has very kindly agreed to do some lectures with me in Canada, where he lives, in January. It is in my heart, it is deep in my heart to have one of those be at Niagara, somewhere near the falls, near that water. I would love for it to be on January 6th, which is Epiphany. But I don't know, it remains to be seen. It's Canada in winter. I don't know how that's going to work out. And then there will be another one in Toronto, and I'm trying to get him over here as well. So my view is that he has some things to say, and he needs places to say those. And it's always, it's different to have a breathing people in front of you when you're doing this stuff. It's a different kind of feeding each other, and I think all of these things are important. So I wanted to say we're going to be in Canada in January, come hell or high water. And then the other thing I want to do is make sure I ask you, is there any way that you want to make sure people know how to contact you, or is that like not on your list?
People, and everyone's welcome to contact me just through the blog, the ruiner777@gmail.com. So just email address.
Okay.
Facebook's a little touchy with me right now, because right now the Facebook that everyone's kind of using for me it's funny because I'll put up something that's kind of for this community, and people from the community will comment it on. My own parents will be commenting on it, and a lot of people don't even realize, hey, my parents are on there commenting about it. My brothers, various people that know me on a daily basis and don't understand that don't know who the Ruiner is, have been kind of interacting with you also. It's been kind of really funny for me to observe.
Yeah.
So I do prefer not to use Facebook as much as possible, but I don't mind people adding me in and sending me messages through there either.
Okay, so the Ruiner777@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Everyone's welcome to contact me. I'm pretty easy to talk to. I don't have a lot of time these days, and I apologize for that. It takes a while to actually get to, for me to actually get online with you. I
No,
apologize for
that's
that.
okay, because now I
Hopefully
know
no one
what,
takes it personally ever.
yeah. I know what days to get him, but I'm not telling you because he's mine. Sorry.
I do work a day job. So.
He works a day job. We tend to all work a day job. I don't have a day job anymore, but that's okay because I think it's good for me. I think it's really good for me. It was shutting
I would
me up.
rather not. I mean.
Yeah, yeah, right?
I need
Okay,
it right now.
right. Okay, so my love, we will get back together again very, very soon. And for everybody out there, this is going to be on the Patreon. This is going to be up YouTube and Patreon tomorrow. I'm going to make a jazzy, juicy new opener, and then off we'll go to the races. So, Shane, thank you so much. Now listen, look at him. Does he look like a ruiner? Hell no, he doesn't look like a. He looks like a bunny. He looks like a bunny, not a ruiner. I'm right, right? Oh yeah. Now we're gonna get a whole comment section about the Illuminati signals you're using, right?
Oh, is that what that was? That was
I
funny
don't know.
ears. My bad.
I don't know. I don't know. All right, I'm gonna end now, okay? You go have some dinner, whatever you need to do, my friend, okay?
Will do.
And thank you so much. See you soon.